Hello Carnivore fans, I am back again on the West Coast. If you saw our last segment, I was on the East Coast reviewing the Land Rover Evoque. Miles could not make it. He was dragged off the aircraft because there was a higher paying customer who needed his seat. I haven't seen him since, so he is either still incarcerated or was probably buried out in the runway, or whatever the airlines do to their lowest paying passengers.
Walter, none of that happened. I told you, I'm not going to fly 2,500 miles just to review an SUV. A supercar maybe, but not an SUV.
Well, Miles, it sounds more intriguing to the viewers if I tell them that you were dragged off the airline like a sack of potatoes.
Well, I guess. Well, welcome everyone. We're here today to review another car in the Land Rover family. It's the Land Rover Discovery Sport 2016 model. Now this car shares a lot of the similar hardware with the Range Rover Evoque, including the engine, the transmission and the suspension. The Discovery Sport is the entry-level vehicle in the Land Rover lineup, replacing the old LR2, but this car has been elongated and widened. In fact, it's about 9 inches longer. It can seat 7 passengers, and it should be a good choice for the soccer mum or dad hauling crowd.
The engine is a 4-cylinder, 2-liter turbocharged. It produces about 240 horsepower and 250 pounds of torque. It also has a 9-speed automatic, which also has paddle shifts. The vehicle weighs about 3,900 pounds, light for an SUV, but not for a car. Let's take a look at the interior.
The rotary shift controller rises up out of the center on startup, just like in the Evoque, and also many of the Land Rover and Jaguar vehicles. The interior is spacious and well appointed, but some of the surfaces feel a little plasticky.
So I agree with Miles. I think some of the interior components are rather cheap looking. I'm really kind of surprised for Land Rover. The side doors, they have little plastic pieces around the door handle. So it's kind of funny how the door handle feels like a really quality piece of metal. And then you have this real cheap plastic that surrounds it. It's kind of surprising that they did that.
The seats in the Discovery Sport, like in a lot of SUVs, keep you in a fairly sat-up straight position. They're relatively comfortable, although they lack side support to keep you from rolling around in faster cornering.
So let's talk about the back seat room. The driver's seat is positioned where the driver would feel pretty comfortable with the legroom. And you can see that I still have a good 2 inches here, 1.5 inches of knee room. And then as far as the headroom is concerned, I have at least another inch up there. So I would have to say that the back seat is pretty adequate in terms of space.
The short front and rear overhangs of this vehicle provide for the approach angles of a serious off-roader. This car has 8.3 inches of ground clearance, and the terrain response system has modes that include sand, snow, mud, and a new dynamic mode. Now this car can also wade through 23 inches of water. That's 4 more inches than the Evoque, and who wouldn't want 4 more inches of anything, right? Okay, Walter, let's jump in the car and go for a ride. Hey Walter, it's telling me the boot's open. Can you jump out and close it?
You mean the rear hatch?
It's the same thing.
All right, yeah.
So first impressions of driving this car, it's a comfortable ride. It's actually got a fair amount of acceleration, which you wouldn't expect for an SUV of this size, and especially an entry-level model. This car certainly isn't luxurious. It's not like a Range Rover. It doesn't have the fixtures and fittings that you would expect of a car like that, but this isn't supposed to be a Range Rover. This is an entry-level SUV in Land Rover's lineup. The car is very functional. Everything is pretty well laid out. I'm not as much of a fan of some of the cheaper materials I think they've opted for in the interior, in particular the plastic on the dash and this cheaper vinyl material on the seats. It just doesn't have the quality feeling. Having said that, when you slam the doors, they feel pretty solid. The car is comfortable to drive. I like the seating position. I actually really like these paddles. They're much bigger than on my GTI. They're much bigger than on the Jaguar XF that we tested. And the car sounds pretty good as well. You know, when you shift down, it's got a pretty good sound. It's got this sport mode I can shift into here. All in all, it feels pretty good. Another thing about this car that I do also like is the brakes. As well as accelerating fast, it also brakes pretty fast as well. You know, this is a good car if you have a family. It's safe, it's well laid out. Alright, now I've had my impression of the car, let's go pick up Walter and resume the road test.
Steering feedback in the Evoque is a dead horse. You just don't get the sensation that you used to get in cars that didn't have electronic steering. It seems to me like there's a business opportunity for somebody to come up with a better steering mechanism than electric steering, since the feedback just isn't there. I do like the paddle shifts on the vehicle. I tend to always use paddle shifts, and I really like downshifting to slow the vehicle down, and I think these work really well. There doesn't seem to be a lot of hesitation. The acceleration, I think, is pretty good for a 4-cylinder car. This is a 3,800 pound, 3,900 pound vehicle, and you know, the acceleration's pretty good considering its size and size of the engine as well. So comparing this vehicle to the Evoque to me felt more like a car than an SUV, whereas the Discovery Sport feels more like a SUV. It feels more lumberous as you kind of come around corners, but it does hold its weight and its position quite well around corners. Most car companies perform a battery of tests on their vehicles, like crankcase ventilation, suspension testing under extreme climates, and corrosion or rust testing. We came up with our own test. It's called the Vehicle Don't Run Over Miles test. Here we go. Oh! That didn't go well. I guess this vehicle doesn't have that option.
Alright, so let's talk about prices of this car. This model ranges from the high $30,000 all the way up to almost $60,000, and this car, like a lot today, comes with your typical 4-year, 50,000 mile limited warranty. Now, other competitors for this probably would include the BMW X3, Jaguar F-Pace, and the Porsche Macan.
Now let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. First of all, the good. You get a lot of luxury name for the money with this vehicle. And there are a lot of German manufacturers who make SUVs who would probably be envious of this car's off-road capability.
So let's talk about the bad. Unfortunately, I think the interior is lacking some of the luxury finishes and touches that some of its competitors have, including the Evoque. There's a lot of cheaper materials in the Walter that I noticed, plastics and vinyls, and things that just don't feel as good to the touch. I think the overall build quality is pretty good, but there were some issues on this car that we had today, albeit I think it is a higher mileage, higher use car, but just a few gremlins that crept up over the day of test driving that concern me a little bit about long-term ownership.
And Miles, I think you hit the nail on the head. Talking about the ugly, the predicted reliability of this vehicle is that you will be going to pick up the vehicle a lot from the shop.
Alright, so it really comes down to, Walter, would I buy this car? And I think probably the answer is no. It's a pretty decent car, and certainly it has some nice features, but unfortunately it's lacking some of the luxury finishes that I would expect for a car in this bracket. And frankly, this is a pretty competitive field. There's a lot of cars competing here in this price range that frankly have better luxury quality. So I think I'm going to have to say no.
So that takes care of this segment of Carnivore. Remember to keep watching our segments. We did a segment on the Evoque last time. And also subscribe to our channel and provide comments as to things that you'd like to see or things that you think we should improve upon.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching. See you next time.